So we're here to talk about a pretty important topic today, and I think we just get right into it because one of the things that I've noticed, and I know you've noticed because I've heard you talk about this quite a bit, is that people in their 30s and their 40s, even people in their 50s, like they have most everything that they want physically or materially, but they're still feeling unfulfilled. And it seems more profound even now after the craziness that went on a couple of years ago. And I think a lot of people are actually sensing that this is happening earlier and earlier in their lives, where maybe people didn't feel this until later in life. People are now feeling it earlier. And it feels like maybe we're just spending too much time like doing the things that don't sustainably bring us that sense of joy and fulfillment. And I'm wondering what you think about that in your work.
Yeah, it was certainly a jolt for all of us, the pandemic. But I
Yeah.
think sometimes out of adversity is when we emerge better and stronger and perhaps even more aware. And I think what people have really woken up to now is that as a race, we've become more aware of our own mortality, how vulnerable we can be, and also how important it is that we cultivate lives where we actually create our own sustainability as opposed to waiting for others to create that context for us. So I don't think right now it's about when did it happen for you? Did it happen for you before the pandemic, or has it just occurred to you now? The question is, I think it's that we have woken up to the fact that we're more educated about what's happening around us and how it affects us, and our value systems have shifted as a result of that. So I think the question then becomes, what are you doing about it?
Well, what is the knowledge that we have about this, like right now?
I think as I listen to a lot of the clients at Envia and myself as well, I think our family went through a greater sense of awareness around a few things. Even for children and their schooling systems, I think we became aware of how limited or elevated we can be depending on what environment we're in. So we became more conscious of our own environments and the ones that we create and the ones we choose versus the ones we cannot choose. We also became aware of our fear. I think we were all living very confidently, perhaps complacently. And so now we have this sense of fear about, whether we are able to create and choose differently. And, so it's one thing to realize you want something different, but it's another to have the courage to
Mm.
change things around us. We also learned about our limited capacity to adapt. If we went through a really hard time as a family, as many, many others did, we started to think about how are we able to adapt to circumstances? Do we shine in times of change, or do we tend to shrink away when there's adversity around us? Our values have also changed. There's a greater awareness of what really matters. I mean, what really, really matters versus, I care about everything and I want to be everything to everybody. So I think our value systems have had to be sharpened. We've had to get really clear about that. And finally, I think when it comes to awareness is I think we all have woken up to our responsibility in terms of the impact and the purpose we serve here in this lifetime. I think a lot of people are giving that a really hard look right now.
I think impact and purpose are two things that people strive for and that they want, but sometimes they just can't put their finger on it. And so we have all this great knowledge, and here we are with epic levels of overwhelm, anxiety, stress, and there's mental illness. People feel burnt out, they feel isolated, they feel lonely, not even to mention like the vast number of physical ailments that result from that. I don't even want to name some of them, but I think we all know what the big ones are that come from these circumstances. So, why are so many people and similarly so many organizations struggling with this?
Because I think, Chris, with knowledge comes responsibility to act. And I think that's where we're actually kind of floundering a little bit, right? Because responsibility on its own is two different words. It's our ability to respond, right? So you have an ability to respond in different ways. You may choose inaction, and a lot of people are choosing inaction. They have the knowledge, but they're choosing not to do anything with it. And then there's others who know that they can adapt or they need to respond, but they require certain skills to do that, right? They haven't understood how to get to where they want to get.
Hmm.
So the knowledge on its own just sits on a shelf until you decide, okay, I need to do something about it. That's step one. And step two is, what is it that you're going to do about it? And I think that the longer that people have sort of stood and looked at the problem instead of starting to take small steps towards a solution, the stress is compounding. There's anxiety, as you said, and a lot of other things happening that are escalating, not just in our homes or within ourselves, but also in the places we work.
I think you mentioned the word inaction just now. And I really do think that inaction is one of those things that we see most people engaging in. It's the easiest, it's the path of least resistance, right? I'm not going to do anything about this. I'm just going to ignore it and hope it goes away. What does life look like for people who choose inaction in your experience?
So there's two sets of people. If you're someone who has chosen not to take action, I kind of tend to see that there are two groups of people in that regard. There are those that actually haven't connected the dots between what they're experiencing every day and the knowledge they have. So they know that something has changed, but they haven't yet connected the dots as to how that's playing out for them. Then there's the other group that actually has fully understood what is stressing them out, what is causing the anxiety, the dissonance within themselves and with others, and how are they actually going to navigate. Even that path is open to them, but they've actually chosen to not do anything about it because it's fear, right? Like everything else, it's having the courage to change, and this degree of change can sometimes be daunting for a lot of people.
Mm.
Regardless of what group you're in, here's some of the things that people are, kind of those people that are in those two groups are starting to show. You have people on autopilot. They're going day to day, transactional, very surface level conversations, very surface level relationships. They're just kind of skimming because there's too much stress to get deep into anything. It's very mechanical living. They go day to day, they go to work, they take care of the kids, they make dinner, they go to sleep. And so there's that kind of what I call sort of stagnancy.
Mm.
Then there's others who tend to sort of, have this adversity mindset. I'm the victim in all of this. Stuff is happening to me. No one is helping me out of this. And that's rampant right now. So people are turning to their organizations, their workplaces, they're turning to their families, they're pointing at some people in their lives who are negative, and they're kind of pointing it away from themselves. So the lack of ownership is very prevalent right now. And then there is those that are just physically and mentally and emotionally already crushing under all of this, and therefore they're not acting. So you're starting to see a lot of the trends that you just described. The stress compounds and it turns into burnout. And then what happens? They don't just quietly quit on their jobs, they're also quietly quitting in their families and their
Mm.
relationships, right? They're just withdrawing. So there's that kind of behavior. Those that who acted out are reactive, frustrated, and there's others who shy away, and you see them getting into all kinds of addictions and escapism and kind of withdrawn and not being able to engage with exactly finding a solution.
Let me ask you this. How much of this is centered around that people have a hard time trusting themselves?
Um, I think we all got beaten down when all of this happened during the pandemic. So some of us thrive, but this was like pretty massive change we went through. So I think it hurt everybody's trust in themselves to some degree or the other.
Mhm.
Right? We were faced with something so big and so unique, and not just ourselves, but our children were exposed, and that's fear in itself, right? So I think everyone lost a little bit of confidence and trust in themselves. And I found that it is those that have practiced presence or knew how to stay present have actually learned to rebuild the trust within themselves.
That's great. Yeah. We've talked about things like stress. We've talked about things like burnout. A lot of people equate the two, but I think there are some pretty profound differences. What's the difference between stress and burnout in your perspective?
It's a really good question. So let's talk about stress. There's good stress. We know of the good stress and we know of the bad stress, right? So there's a certain amount of stress is actually very good for us because otherwise we would not progress in anything that we do. We need some sort of imperative. So there's the good stress that we want to kind of stay in. Which, for the majority of the day, most of us operate with our beta brainwaves. So we tend to be in a regular rhythm of dealing with what is familiar to ourselves. And so there's a good stress going on there, right? We understand our deadlines, we understand how the plans to get there and that stuff. So when we start to move from a place of good stress to bad stress, right? We're starting to operate from no longer from a place of creativity or resolution or anything like that. We're starting to operate from a place of pulling away from the problem and just kind of focusing on the problem itself.
Yeah.
So stress in itself, when it starts to compound and there is no release. So if you haven't got a release practice for your stress, it could be your physical workout, it can be your mental practice, it could be both. It could be just being more mindful in your living, even your health, your intake of food. When that starts compounding, then you start to experience burnout. So burnout is very sedentary. So if you look at bad stress, people can be throwing things, tearing the place down. You see a little bit more action. But when you start to see burnout, it's when you're now in a very, it's creeping up on you slowly. So you don't actually know it's turning into burnout, but it makes you feel very depleted. Now you start to see a lot of physical symptoms. You feel used up. You're
Mhm.
no longer in the fight or flight. You're actually very much resigning from that
Wow.
battlefield. And
Yeah.
this is when that depression and other things start to take over.
So I know you help a lot of people work through these type of things, and everybody knows that you go farther, faster when you have a guide who's been through it before. Have you experienced this kind of stuff? Have you gone through this? And what's worked for you?
Yeah, I think there's never a better teacher than the teacher, perhaps, that has walked at least some of your path, right? Relatability is extremely important. So, like many others, I've been through things like job loss, child loss, divorce, just to name a few. And it was probably when I was 30, when I was going through one of those things, that it was like a big life change, unexpected. And I began this conscious journey of starting to sort of take control back of what I felt was the energy I was giving away to others to decide for me, decide where my boundaries were. And I was making some poor decisions around the kind of energy I was allowing into my life. So I started this practice when I was 30. And what I found is, though I was physically very fit, I didn't feel very mentally resilient. And I
Mhm.
was not very clear about what I wanted. And so every time I stumbled and I fell and I got up again, I began to invest more of my time and my money in really understanding the power of aligning how I think to how I act to what creates impact for me. And when I started lining that stuff up for me in my practice, I began to find that I adopted a very different mindset. My mindset, as I describe it now, is an adventure mindset. What does that mean? It means that I don't shy away from new environments, uncomfortable spaces. In my 40s, I saw that really grow within me because I became a step parent. I began to lead global teams around the world. I championed things that I cared about, like youth development. I'm a mother, I'm a stepmother. I teach, mentor a lot of different types of people. I even started climbing mountains. That wasn't on my script, Chris, but it's just this sense of open-mindedness and a sense of faith in myself that really allowed me to go through those spaces. So yeah, those are some of the things that I think I myself have experienced. I get asked a lot, Chris, where do you find the time and the energy to
Mhm.
do the things you do? Because how do you have at the time 3 kids and do all these other things I just talked about? And here's the thing I say now, I've learned how to manage my energy versus just define myself by the 24 hours I have in a day and the money goals and the other tangible, limited material goals that we all have. We all have those. But if you really want to talk about what is, for me, infinite, it's the amount of energy we have. We just
That's
have
great.
to learn to release what we don't need so that it remains sustainable.
I love it. That's so well put. So, speaking of well put, you've used the word sustainable quite a bit. Now, we talked about stagnancy, and we talked about anxiety and overwhelm. We talked about depression, and we talked about stress and burnout. But when you started our conversation today, you used the word sustainable, and I've heard you use it a few times. How do people get through these things sustainably?
So, bridging these states, as you call them, bridging them to being self-sustainable is one of the reasons why we came up with the Aura Experience program at Envia. Because for me, over time, it was really about how can I be more self-sustaining, self-empowered to manage my own energy levels, as opposed to allowing others to control where my energy goes. So this experiential program is really designed to do that. And so what do we teach people are simple experiential strategies and human skills that actually create personal change in very big ways. And so what we teach is sort of a three-stage process. The power to observe first is very important. The ability to observe yourself so that your relationship with stress changes from not being victimized to one of ownership and control. The second stage is called release. So once you have a greater understanding and are able to discern, what must remain in your space now versus what you can let go, then you are practicing something called release. That discernment continually, habitually, knowing that something should stay in my space and something doesn't need to stay in my space, allows you to stay present and positioned to move in the direction you choose. And finally, when you have learned to observe and release, then you're definitely in a much better place to activate, or what we say is take yourself towards your goals, create a different impact footprint, because you can show up as yourself, free of a lot of the stories that you don't need to keep or hang on to, rather.
So you've been doing this experience with people for a while, what you call the aura experience, and you've had people have some pretty remarkable transformations through this experience. Is there one that inspires you that you think about as you teach others?
Yeah, I think many stand out. All our testimonials are available on our website. I tend to go back just to it puts a smile on my face because everyone has a different, very unique transformation through this program. It just depends on your life journey. But one of the best testimonials we got was from a single father who was in his 40s, who he's a technology professional. If he was right here right now, this is what he would say. He says, "Now I see a calm, strong, confident young man who is striving to new heights and goals and ambitions that he once thought were not possible." And other words that he shared with us is, I feel very stable and rooted. It's probably the most calm and comfortable I've ever felt with me. So he had a whole new introduction to himself through this program. And so what I love about this feedback is that now, a year later, he lives with this abundance of four things. He has energy, he has emotional control, he has confidence, and he has courage. And no, wait, there's one more: adventure. He has a sense of adventure. He's come out of his shell. And for someone who used to keep his head down, working all the time in the office, quiet, silenced, he now speaks up and he takes weeks in the year to go and travel and work in other countries because he stands up for himself in the workplace and he stands by the strengths he brings to his workplace.
That's really beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've used a lot of complex terms in describing the aura experience. Can you simplify it and just sum up what the aura experience really means, what it would mean for me?
Well, what it wouldn't mean for you is talk therapy, because I've done plenty of talk therapy in my life. It's really nice when you sit on a couch and somebody asks you one short question and off you go, talking, 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 talking. And there's a lot of good processing that happens perhaps in the short term. But here in the aura experience, it's a deeply revealing self-awareness practice. And so it's designed to open up your mind and your heart to different facets of experience in life versus the very limited one that most people are experiencing. Because we all have this conditioning that we grew up with, and we live within that very limited version of the story we've told ourselves. And so our likes, our dislikes, our preferences, our pain, our trauma, all of those things, our parental relationships, our other relationships, all of that defines us. But to be honest, through the aura experience, a mindfulness practice actually allows you to reclaim control over your relationship with stress and your own self-talk. It gives you a way to regain your clarity and control over the design of your life journey, not just going on the life journey that's pushing you along, but the one that you choose to design and the direction that takes. And it's also a sustainable way to breed positive energy and impact towards everything around you, and not something that constantly requires to be fueled from the external so that you can continue to give.
Wow.
So what I find is that my smart and very successful clients and I are always focused on making sure that we become very self-empowered to create our own experience. And that's the one thing that I think really sums up that what aura experience brings.
So if somebody wanted to brainstorm with you about what this looks like for them, I'm sure wherever this video sits, we can have a link somewhere near it for them to get on your calendar and chat with you.
Yeah, you can always book, and you don't need to worry about, being sold anything at all. I think just coming and exploring what this experience may do for you, and coming to share what's in your space right now. You can always come and chat with me, share your experience. I like to sort of listen more in those sessions than talk more. I'd like to hear what it is that is challenging you and how you think or may not know how this experience may work for you. So the link to go to is book.meetandvia.com, where you can look at my calendar and book something that's convenient for you. And then whether you choose to move forward with it will become more clear through that conversation. But I think that conversation will be very revealing to
Wouldn't
you.
you say that for like the right person, it just clicks for them pretty instantly that it's the right thing for them?
I found that
Yeah.
either it's even clicked before having the chat, just
Mm,
by going to our website, for example, and exploring what this is about, and maybe following us on social media, and you start to think, this is something that I really want. But if not, and you still feel like you need some more information, that's why we always keep our calendar open for that reason.
amazing. This has been such an insightful conversation. I'm really grateful for your time today.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris.